Hi again then guys, and welcome to the very first episode of another brand new racing game series of reviews. Probably more so reviews than anything else for this game in particular. I don't plan to necessarily do much tuning for this game, especially because there's now a second game of course, and motorbike games aren't the most popular around anyway, which is why the ones that are so popular tend to stand out a lot, stuff like Tourist Trophy for instance. But the game is of course Ride. Now in particular I played this game on the PS3, that's the footage that you can see here, and the unfortunate byproduct of that is that it doesn't look very good. The graphics on this game are pretty lacking compared to the PS4 equivalent, and of course there is a second game which looks better in comparison as well, and we may well cover that second game down the line, although I don't actually own it yet. I haven't got around to buying and playing that game. However, I played Ride quite a lot, I own quite a few of the bikes in the game, raced quite a bit, and I figure why not start the series with probably my favourite bike in the game. That's generally how I start these new series. I started my Project Gotham series with my favourite bike, the Y2K, and why not start this one with a similar thing? It's not a Y2K, unfortunately, as much as I would love to see that feature in a bike game, but that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. This one, though, also appeals very much to my core, not necessarily core values, but core interests when it comes to high performance vehicles, not just bikes but cars as well, because I am a massive fan of alternative performance. I'm not a fan of environmentally friendly cars. There is a big difference, because a lot of people automatically think that if you like electric vehicles you're a greenie. That doesn't mean that. I like electric cars not because they're good for the environment, but because I just think they're cool. They offer performance that's totally different. They offer seamless acceleration, effortless torque, an interesting sound on some occasions. This bike, for instance, is not silent, you can hear it. And I just like the way it has this almost gas turbine style, again referring to the Y2K, this feeling of relentlessly building performance, which that direct gear allows you to have in many electric cars. Of course, ones which don't have gears in a traditional sense, and some do. Likewise with a gas turbine, you have some gears, but the way it delivers its performance and its power and its torque is totally different to a normal car. And it can result in people feeling or thinking, due to the sound and the acceleration, that electric or gas turbine vehicles are sluggish. It does seem that way, but the reality is, it may feel sluggish, but you'll also find yourself overtaking everything else on the grid. So, I like that. I think that's pretty cool. Now, this bike in particular is one which I love the technology behind, but I don't actually love the bike itself, in terms of its look in particular, because the bike in question is the Lightning LS-218. It's an American superbike. As I said, it's electric, and it's a very powerful electric motorbike. The battery pack is very large in it, so the range is actually pretty good, and even the pricing on Ride is it's a good price. It's 39 grand or just under, which is way cheaper than any of the MotoGP machines. That's in fact a lot cheaper than many of the other normal superbikes, stuff like your MV Agustas and Bemotas for instance, and yet it has more power and, in particular, a whole lot more torque than pretty much every other bike in the game. And unlike some of the other electric bikes, such as the Energica Eco, or Ego, whatever that thing's called, this one is not, A, ugly, but it's also not overweighted, because it weighs 224 kilos, which is more. That's about 20 or 30 kilos more than most high-end superbikes like Ducatis, but at the same time, that's not too bad. That's a similar kind of weight to something like a Y2K, again, funnily enough, and with 200 horsepower on board, it's going to be quick. That's a similar kind of power to a Ducati Desmo, so again, potential is definitely there. Now the torque in particular is far, far higher on this bike than pretty much any of the other bikes in the game. 168 pound-feet is a whole lot for a motorbike to have. That's like 10 times the amount that many motorbikes have. Now the horsepower per tonne is not necessarily something which most riders would talk about, because it doesn't really matter as much on a bike. But to give you some idea of how that would compare to a car, you're looking at 893 horsepower per tonne from this bike, which in more bike-friendly terms is 0.9 horsepower per kilo, which, that's not bad. A Yamaha R1, for instance, has 1 horsepower per kilo, at least in its around 2006 form. So, again, that gives you some idea of the kind of track potential which this could have. Now, when you actually ride this bike, I was going to say drive then, but when you ride the bike, it is different, for sure. to many of the other bikes. It's certainly different to any of the petrol bikes because A, you don't have gears to work with in a traditional sense, so the acceleration is much more seamless, but at the same time as well, the way that it delivers that acceleration does, as I said earlier, make it feel a little bit more sluggish, especially in lower speed corners. Plus the lack of a sound can sometimes give you a bit of a hindrance when you're braking, because although the bike is slowing down, it may not feel like it is. Again, an eerily similar issue to what a gas turbine vehicle will often have, because with a gas turbine you don't have engine braking, so they can often feel like they're not slowing down well enough. That can be an issue with this bike. It doesn't feel like it's scrubbing off the speed quick enough. Now in real life, this is the fastest electric bike in the world. I personally am more of a fan of the Mission Motorcycles RS, which is also an electric bike. It's not on the game unfortunately, but it's a grey and white one, single headlight, MV Agusta style, gorgeous bike. But it's nowhere near as quick as this one. That bike can do about 140. This one, as the name suggests, is a 218 mile per hour motorbike. That is insanely fast for any electric vehicle, let alone a motorbike. And although it can't actually reach that on the game, which of course it should, it is still a lot of fun to ride. So bikes like this are never the go-to for pure aficionados of bikes, generally speaking, but for those of us like me who love things that are more oddball or the left field choice, then give it a go, because you might just enjoy it more than you think. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time with another bike review, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.